Good afternoon, ladies and gents. This is a Celtic State of Mind. My name's Laura Bradburn. It's Friday, and so that means, as always, I'm joined by Tony Haggerty and Jim Orr. Tony, how you doing?
I'm very well, Laura. Yourself?
Not too bad. Jim, how are you?
Good, Laura, thanks.
Good to hear, good to hear. Now, we usually like to try and keep things light-hearted on a Friday, or as light-hearted as they can be, given the season that we've had, but we'll start off with a little bit more of a sombre tone. You've seen some of the other podcasts this week talking about it, but yesterday marked the 32nd anniversary of the Hillsborough disaster, and I thought, given Tony's close relationship with, or I should say close relationship, but idolisation of Kenny Dalglish and the fact that both him and Jim will obviously have memories of that day, I thought who better to ask than these two guys to give their input. And I know some people in the comments will be sitting thinking this isn't an issue that affected Celtic directly, so why are we talking about it in a Celtic podcast? But I think everybody can agree that it's an event that marked the hearts and minds of every football fan up and down this country, even those of us who were only young at the time and maybe don't remember it directly happening. It's been part of the football consciousness for years since, and so it's always right to mark it. Tony, I'll come to you first. As I said before, you've said in your book, you've said numerous times in this podcast that Kenny Dalglish is a major idol of yours, and we heard Declan talking about it on the podcast yesterday. The whole event marked him as a man, didn't it? It left its mark on him indelibly, not only that disaster, but the Heysel disaster and the Ibrox disaster, both of which he was also unfortunate enough to be directly involved in. So what are your thoughts on your memories of Hillsborough and on Kenny Dalglish and how he handled that whole situation?
Strap yourself in, because I might speak for a wee while here, right? Okay. Two quotes from Dalglish stand out at that time, right? First one, post Hillsborough, he said, they supported Liverpool. Now it's a turn of Liverpool Football Club to support them. And then he was asked about his role in it, and he said, I just know I've done a little bit to help them. It's a fraction of what they've done to help us. I'll forever be the one that's in the red. Right? The humanity and decency that Kenny Dalglish showed during that time. He was a manager of Liverpool Football Club. He was a public face. And he not only had to manage the club and take care of the players, but somehow through that period, it was King Kenny who had to be the shining and guiding light to all the families who'd lost their loved ones. Now, I think he went to all, or nearly all of the 96 funerals, but he certainly made sure there was a Liverpool representative at every one of them, right? And bearing in mind, this was a city that was swimming against a tidal wave of grief, right? And against a system that had besmirched the whole city, the whole football club, and those loyal supporters on to the most horrific tragedy, which we all now know was entirely preventable. But if you want to measure true greatness, then you look no further than King Kenny post Hillsborough. He and his family stood shoulder to shoulder with other families in the 96 who'd suffered immeasurable loss. But King Kenny and his family were also silently suffering, carrying their own burden. And it was up to Dalglish to carry the whole emotional weight of Liverpool Football Club and its fan base. He stood up for the truth and justice, and he refused to back down. And he was there at every juncture for the 96 and the people of Liverpool and the city. I've never forgotten it. When he quit 2 years after Hillsborough in the aftermath of that wonderful 4-each draw with Everton in the FA Cup tie, he said that he quit because he couldn't make the substitutions and he didn't know what to do. And if that was the case, he didn't deserve to be there. I just think he just needed to get out and breathe, because I don't think he was allowed to grieve himself properly. See, when they open King Kenny up, when he eventually leaves, there'll be a piece of his big red Liverpool heart missing, because it died at Hillsborough. Part of it died and a piece of it's missing. And I've said before on this pod, as a player he was untouchable, but see, as a person in the aftermath of Hillsborough, he came into a league of his own, and you can't hold a candle to him, because he showed what a born leader and a born leader of men really was. And it took its toll on him. It did. You're right. You said that toll. And, but I still say that the Hillsborough scars in King Kenny have never really healed. But for his football ability alone, he's revered on Merseyside. But for stepping up to the plate after Hillsborough, He remained a bigger hero to the Liverpool people and their cause. King Kenny, nickname says it all. But the one thing I would urge everybody to do after this podcast is to go onto YouTube and listen to the radio commentary of Peter Jones on the BBC, because it's burned in my memory. And he describes the gymnasium at Hillsborough being used as a mortuary for dead bodies. He describes stewards packing the belongings of the dead into plastic bags. He describes the ambulances coming onto the pitch and the oxygen being administered to victims. And he paints this picture, haunting, harrowing, emotional scene, yet in the midst of it all, he sometimes picks out these evocative, powerful, piercing and poignantly brilliant and beautiful words to wrap up the broadcast. You can hear my voice because I get emotional. And he says this: there are red and white scarves of Liverpool. There are red and white bobble hats of Liverpool. There are red and white rosettes of Liverpool and nothing else. Out there on the enclosure where all the deaths occurred and the sun shines now. That's the saddest bit of radio I think I've ever heard and probably ever hear in my lifetime. And if you substitute the words Liverpool in those sentences, it could easily be your club and their supporters. And if Peter Jones' commentary doesn't move you or make you want to cry, then you don't love football and you'll never really understand what it means to be a true football fan. And it's there, but for the grace of God go I, as we've all done what the 96 did and attended football matches, but the difference is we've always come home. And one last thing, I'm going to dedicate some words to the 96 and the justice for the 96 campaigners and their families, and their lyrics borrowed from a U2 song called American Soul. And 32 years on from Hillsborough, they seem so apt. And the words say, blessed are the arrogant, for theirs is a kingdom of their own company. Blessed are the bullies, for one day they will have to stand up to themselves. And blessed are the liars, for the truth can be awkward.
Well,
there you go.
Jim,
How do you follow that?
I was going to say, I want to come to you. I want to ask how, what your memories are of the day. I don't think I could feel myself getting emotional just listening to Tony. I've read books about it. I've watched documentaries. I get emotional about it because, as Tony said, I've been a football fan. I've gone to football matches. I've loved it. I've always been fortunate enough to come home. But you undoubtedly will have memories of that day and how things unfolded. What are your memories of that day and what are your thoughts about it 32 years on?
I think it's very hard to follow what Tony said there, but you were asking at the start about this being a Celtic podcast, and how you can tie this back to Celtic is that you've got one of the best football stadiums in Europe, and you can trace that back to Hillsborough, basically, because what you'll find is that people like yourself, Laura, and I'd say anyone under the age of 30, 35 will not know what it's like to go to a football stadium where you stand, and you stand for the whole game. And you literally did take your life in your hands, going to a lot of games. And ask any Celtic fan, ask any football fan that went to football before the all-seated stadium what it was like. And Tony talked about YouTube there. If you go to YouTube and watch any match that features the Kop in the 60s, and you'll see people swaying down the Kop, crushing other people. It's all kind of good-natured stuff. But you have matches like, I think this week was the 50th anniversary of Celtic beating Leeds, with over 130,000 at Hampden Park. That was dangerous. Even outside football grounds are dangerous. It's been 20, 30 years since I've been to Tynecastle, but also Tynecastle was a death trap. When you via the Gorgie Road entrance, you were all trapped in together. And in fact, there was not an incident 2 or 3 years ago at Celtic Park, just outside the ground, where people were getting crushed, having to jump over walls to get away. So
yeah.
I think when you found it before Hillsborough, football directors, football administrators had no time for fans at all. And I think your generation has benefited from that, because you're used to going to a football match and sitting down. So that's the Celtic connection, I think. In terms of what I remember of the day, we were playing on the Sunday in the Scottish Cup semi-final. Rangers were playing on the Saturday. And for some reason, I had the TV on, which I didn't usually have, and then they went over to Hillsborough. and you saw the stuff starting to unfold, and you thought at the time it was guys just fighting, because throughout the 80s were a bit mental in terms of football hooliganism, and it was only 3 years after Heysel. And Heysel was different because Heysel was caused by people not behaving, whereas Hillsborough was caused by lots of other factors. So you just thought, well, that's just people fighting. And then as it started to unfold, it became more and more hard to watch it. And then, as Tony said, you heard the reports coming in that it was people have actually died, and you're thinking, oh dear, and it was like 10 people, it becomes 20 people, becomes, and you couldn't understand, you could understand why it happened because of what I just said there, but you couldn't fathom the enormity of what happened. And the Ibrox disaster was like 71, so that was 18 years later. So there was no, there wasn't the extent of radio and TV broadcasting and football matches. So that kind of happened, and nobody kind of knew much about it. Even lots of people had come back from the game and knew nothing about it at all. Whereas Hillsborough was like live in front of you, and it was just heartbreaking watching it. And then what then unfolds, the fact that the fans were getting blamed and all the nonsense that happened thereafter, and it took so much time so many years to clear their name. It was just appalling. And I've yourself, Laura, I've read most of the books and saw the documentaries, etc. And it's a hard watch. I think Tony described it really, really well there. But hopefully some of that will never happen again. And I think the fact we've got all-season stadium means that's less likely. But I've still been to football matches since the all-season stadium where you're outside the ground and you're getting crushed and lifted off your feet. So I think that, we move on,
Yeah. No, I think you both summed it up perfectly. And to speak from my generation, certainly I was only a year old when it happened, but to speak to anybody younger than me who's maybe watching this who doesn't remember a time before internet, I just do. But one of the things that moved me a lot was seeing people getting in front of television cameras on the pitch to try and tell their family that they were okay. Because how else did you communicate with people at that time? You had to chap on doors in houses in Sheffield to say, can I use your phone to phone home? There was some people didn't see their family for hours and hours, waiting for them to come off a bus, not knowing if they would come off a bus, having seen that happen. And so for anybody watching this who thinks, I don't know how you can watch it and not think that it was a big deal, but for anybody watching, I would urge you to look out all the documentaries, to read the books, to look at that gymnasium that Tony spoke about so passionately. It's a situation you hope never ever darkens anybody's door again. And hopefully with the safety in place, I know everybody's pushing to go back to some form of safe standing, but I understand the reluctance as far as that's concerned when you see what has happened in the past with standing areas, and hopefully there's a happy medium that can be found so that something like that never happens again. But anyway, we will, like Jim says, we'll move on. We'll try and get back to things that are more directly Celtic. Unfortunately, not as cheery a subject, but I wanted to get this one out the way as well. And in the words of Tony, strap yourself in, because I have some things to say about the Neil Lennon footage that surfaced. Now, I should start this by saying a caveat in that we don't know the timescale of when that happened. We don't know if it's current or if it's not. We don't know what situation Neil Lennon is in as we speak. And having had the week that I've had on Twitter, when I saw that footage, I thought to myself, do not respond immediately, because as we talked about last week, your response can be dictated by emotion, it can be dictated by anger, it can be dictated by upset. But I have to say, when I was watching that footage and watching some of the comments underneath it, I was utterly, utterly disgusted. What you saw there was not a man who had just had a few too many to drink. That was a man who, whether it's now, whether it was in the past, whether it's something that you'll experience again in the future, that was a man struggling. That was a man trying to medicate with whatever he could put his hands on. And I swear to anybody listening to this, if you had the temerity, the gall, to go on social media and say that he deserves it, that because you aren't a Celtic supporter or because you thought Neil Lennon was a poor manager, as I did, that he deserved the kind of treatment that he received by having that plastered all over social media at what was obviously one of his most vulnerable moments, then I am absolutely disgusted, because I stand here right now and say to you, if you don't know or have never experienced depression, alcoholism, somebody or know somebody close to you who has tackled that or been affected by it, then those words could never come out of your mouth. That I was just absolutely shocked by some of what I saw. And as somebody who's been on Twitter since 10 or 12 years ago, I thought I'd seen everything. That was just absolutely shocking to me. I could not believe it. And JP put it well yesterday. I don't care what team you support. I don't care what team you play for. I don't care what your politics are. I don't care what your beliefs are. Nobody deserves to be treated in the way Neil Lennon was treated, and the only person that deserves any kind of criticism is the scum that put that up on the internet after filming it. Tony, take the floor.
I read a tweet from a quote from Jurgen Klopp, and it sums it up brilliantly, right? And it came into my head when I saw the Neil Lennon video. And Jurgen Klopp said, see if you're sending these messages and videos and online abuse while claiming to be a Liverpool supporter, I take the word Liverpool out and say a football supporter, be it to players or an opponent or whoever, then you're not welcome at our club or in our sport. See if you've got this hate in your heart and in your head, you can walk alone because you do not walk with us. And I say that to anybody, like you said, who posts messages, abuse. You're a cretin. I've said it before when I was saying that the girls are getting abuse. You're an absolute cretin. There is no room for your bigotry, your racism, your sectarianism, or whatever ism you've got. Bin it, because you're not welcome in football, not Liverpool, Celtic, Rangers, for that matter, or any club. You're just not welcome. You're an absolute cretin. And whoever posted that video of Neil Lennon, I hope they get dealt with. I hope they get found and they get dealt with, because he deserved to feel the full force of the law. Because as you rightfully said, that's a man that was struggling. And if you've never known, as you say, depression, alcoholism, and any of these kind of illnesses, then you will never know. You know, as they say, before you cast whatever aspersions, walk a mile in somebody's shoes. You know, so I defy him to walk a mile in Neil Lennon's shoes and put up with some of what Neil Lennon's had to put up with in this country. Shocking, absolutely shocking. And it's a vile video. I only saw it because it appeared on my timeline. And do you know what? And it got to the end, and then the guy shouted the slur, and I just thought, you know what? That's it.
I watched it, Tony, and wish I hadn't seen it.
Correct. I didn't want to see it. I couldn't not unsee it, if you get what I mean. And I actually threw my phone down and I just walked away from my phone, because I thought, I don't want to be scrolling through messages, people justifying it and others, you know, in support of Neil Lennon. I just threw it away, and I came off Twitter that night, because it's a poison, and when you let it infect you in your home like that, it can affect you. So I just think that at some point, people that do this have to be held accountable, because it's a crime.
Yep. And I say it again. One thing that came to mind was, I've seen footage and I've seen videos of Paul Gascoigne at his worst. I took no pleasure in that. Same as JP yesterday said, I take no pleasure in seeing any human being in that kind of state. And it doesn't matter where you're from. Jim, I've seen a lot of people levelling criticism at us and other podcasts, saying how can you be sympathetic now when you were so critical of Neil Lennon as a manager? But I think there is a distinction there to be made. I don't think it's hypocritical to say that you didn't want him to continue to be manager and you didn't think he was doing a good job, while at the same time saying he doesn't deserve the treatment that he's received, having that stuff posted all over social media.
I think they're two different things, Laura, altogether. Tony came out with a phrase there. There's another phrase is, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I think if somebody thought it was okay to film somebody and put it on social media, then they should be perfectly okay with them being outed and then been put on social media because they thought it was okay to do that. And social media is a great thing, but it's also a terrible thing as well. And there needs to be a lot more done about this kind of stuff. That Twitter, the people who run Twitter must know where that came from. And it's a crime. So out this guy. And maybe if that happens, people will think twice about doing some of the things that they've done, taping Neil Lennon or taping Paul Gascoigne or whatever. Social media should be a good thing, a happy thing, uplifting thing. And as Tony said, it's poison at times. It's absolute poison. Neil Lennon's a big personality. Neil Lennon's well known. As you said before, we don't know when that was. And I think if you were Neil Lennon, you have to be very careful where you go for a pint because people are sitting about with camera phones and whatever, so he has to be careful. But I think all we did, or all anyone would do, is put a subjective opinion out there to say that, this guy's doing well, this guy's not doing so well. And the results spoke for themselves. And I think the majority of Celtic fans got to the point that says maybe we need a change of manager. I don't think people were abusing Neil Lennon. I mean, there was clowns putting on the kind of no entry sign with the Neil Lennon picture behind it. But they're just clowns as well. And that's the usual social media stuff. And I think if you take on the job as Celtic's manager or any major club, then people are always going to comment on whether you're doing a particularly good job. At the end of the day, as I keep saying on the podcast, it's just a job. It's just the fact that, you can actually see the job that they're doing and people want to talk about it. And it's all over the media. You and I do a job and nobody sees what we do. And I think if you had people commenting your job, you get a bit annoyed about it. But if you take on such a job like that, you have to expect that people are going to comment. And as long as they keep the comments to, how you're doing as a football manager and nothing personal, what that thing on Twitter was all about personal stuff. It's totally unacceptable. Just all I can do is echo the comments that you guys have made about how bad that was. But yeah, they're totally different. I mean, what happened on Twitter and people assessing how good or bad a particular manager is doing, totally different altogether.
Yeah. To be honest, I think the best thing you can do on Twitter, Facebook or YouTube is watch this very show. So thank you everybody for doing that. Keep watching, keep commenting, keep sharing. We really do appreciate all your input. And if you are affected by any of the topics that we've discussed already today, then obviously there's resources out there. I'll make sure to share some links to things after the show. So if you are struggling, then please make sure and speak to somebody, because I promise you, these situations and these issues do get lighter with the weight of two people carrying them rather than one. So please make sure you do that. But we will move on to, I was going to say we'll move on to lighter fare, but I want to talk about John Kennedy and his potential managerial prospects. So it's up to you whether you consider that lighter fare or not. I was watching the exclusive interview he did with Celtic TV yesterday, and there was a few things in it. Again, I use the old phrase, he spoke well. But Tony, as I was saying to you before we came on air, he talked about potentially relying on somebody producing a piece of magic to win the game against Rangers this weekend. And, if that had been Neil Lennon, a lot of people would have been critical of that. They'd have said there wasn't enough thought put into the sort of plan going forward. So, I think what I took away from it was that you can get away with a lot if you present yourself well, is what I would think. What are your thoughts of maybe what you saw from that interview and how he's done so far in his managerial post?
First and foremost, I think everybody wishes John Kennedy a success, but I think all three of us and a lot of the supporters are in agreement. They just don't want to see him get the job at this particular moment in his coaching career. Because I think it'll be too big for him, and it's not an appointment that would enamour the Celtic fans. I get back to the appointment-disappointment analogy. That would be a major disappointment to the fans. But I think in terms of coming across, he's came across really well. He's backed the club. He spoke out against the SFA last week and came across really well. He was very measured in his comments. And he talks the talk. And last week, the team walked the walk. They played really, really well. And all we wanted when Kennedy took over for the 8 games or however long he's going to be in charge was there to be an improvement and some hope that you could maybe take going into next season. And Jim has spoken about the death by 1,000 cuts. But if they can continue the level of performance, and I'm gauging it, it was Livingston, and Livingston offered not much resistance last week. But there's no reason to suggest that if Celtic can continue to play like that at the end of the season, that they will improve, results can get better, and they can go to Ibrox and win both of those games. And that's all the Celtic supporters wanted. Some improvement, and to go to Ibrox in both these games now and put up some resistance and hopefully come out on the better end of the result. I mean, that's not a hard ask. You know, and Kennedy seems to have sort of galvanised them a wee bit. The proof will be on Sunday. Mm-hmm. You know, because you're going into Ibrox on a massive cup tie, and your season hinges on it in terms of silverware. So we'll be in a better position to judge on how they play. But so far, he's done what you would expect of any kind of Celtic manager. Spoke a good game, came across well, and set his team out to actually attack and win football matches. And he's had a degree of success with that so far.
Yeah, to pick up on something you said there, I got a lot of stick post. I can't remember when it was. I was on, whether it was last Friday's bulletin or the post-match coverage. But I said something along the lines of that. The only way John Kennedy could make a case for himself becoming manager is if he walks into the boardroom with the Scottish Cup at the end of the season and puts it down. Now, I got some feedback on Twitter and things like that saying that I was calling for him to be manager. I can say right here, right now, that is not what I was saying. What I was saying was actually the exact opposite of the only way in which he could be considered for manager from now is if he does walk in with the Scottish Cup, because he's got an opportunity now where if he can get past Rangers, with all due respect to the rest of the competition, you would automatically make us favourites for the trophy, or you should. Maybe this season doesn't reflect that, but saying that is his best chance does not mean that I think he should be manager, because I certainly don't. I think he's got much more to learn, and in fact, I made the argument a few weeks ago that there's a level of consistency that needs to be considered when people talk about getting rid of Scott Brown and potentially keeping John Kennedy, because why would you get rid of one and not the other if they've both performed poorly? But that's a discussion for another day. I'll come to you, Jim. What have you made of things so far? Obviously, he seems to have kind of peaked with the influence that he's had, having that 6-0 win over Livingston that we all said was coming, and we've talked often enough about how he appears to handle himself well in the media situation. Are you impressed by him? What are your thoughts so far?
Firstly, if you're playing by 1,000 cuts bingo, it's only when I say it, not Tony. So 28 minutes is the answer this week. I think John Kennedy is a very intelligent, articulate man. I think he's been very clever. Because I actually thought when he took over, he put his stamp on the team. But he didn't do it straight away. I think he's made subtle, small changes incrementally. And I think if you look at all the games we've played so far, we've made a ridiculous amount of chances or shots on goal. We've had a better shape about us. We've played a bit better. We haven't lost as many goals. We've only lost a 1 goal so far. So you have to say he's done a good job. I think also at the start, in front of the media, I thought he was quite meek. I thought, when he was asked a question, he was saying, yeah, that's right. He wasn't saying anything too controversial. And in the last 2 weeks, he said the thing about the COVID, and then he said the other day about, on our day, the best team. I think he's very clear in terms of what he's done so far. I would like him to get the job. I mean, I always think that, I haven't said too much against John Kennedy this, because again, as I've said a number of times before, I don't really know what he does. And I think there's obviously been a bit of a personality clash between him and the manager. Because when you hear other managers talking about John Kennedy, they all like him. They all think he's a good guy. The Damien Duff and Rodgers of this world, and the players apparently all like him. So he must be doing something right.
Kendo, I think.
And Kendo. I think another thing is as kind of football fans, you can never really look upon a football manager as an actual job. And I think if you look at things from John Kennedy's point of view, I think when the last manager left, he must have thought he was going to get the job at that point. And in fact, when you look back on it, that'd have been a logical thing to do, just to keep the continuity for the last few games of for the season. He doesn't get the job, he must be hacked off. And I'm sure that, people tuning into this must have had a boss in the past where you thought he's a fantastic boss. Love him, you would do anything for him. He takes an interest in you and the staff, and then that guy leaves. And the next boss comes in, and you don't really fancy him at all. And that makes life a bit more difficult. And that's what I think's happened over the last, year and a half or so. But to answer the question, I think he's done really, really well. And I wouldn't be surprised if he won on Sunday. And as you say, if we win on Sunday, then we should go and win the Scottish Cup. So it'll be a kind of slight consolation because nothing else mattered apart from the 10 this year. So it'll be a nice wee way to end the season. But he's doing okay, to answer the question. He's doing okay, yeah.
I think to be honest, Tony, we were talking about it before we came on air, and doing okay for me between now and the end of the season is all we really needed. We needed somebody to come in, steady the ship, calm things down after what had been the most up and down season I can remember for years. So I think in that alone, even if we hadn't played particularly well, he's taken a bit of the sting out of the situation, and that in itself has proved beneficial, I think.
I think the very fact that you're going to Ibrox on Sunday is in as optimistic a mood as you can possibly be tells you the steps that John Kennedy and the effect that he's had on the team. A couple of weeks ago, you wouldn't have wanted Rangers in the Cup. You know what I mean? If a month ago, you'd have been like, oh no, not another game against them. You would have you just wanted, as Jim says, the season to be over. Just get it over and done with and let's move on. So the fact that I remain very optimistic that Celtic can win both the games at Ibrox. I really do. And I think the fact that all the players have got something to play for now, whether it's to win the Scottish Cup, to shatter Rangers' unbeaten league run, playing for a contract or playing for a move, or playing to impress the new guy who's supposedly going to be taking over. And I remain convinced. I'm still in the Eddie Howe camp. I've not flinched from that. I still believe that Eddie Howe will be the new manager of Celtic, and I'm hoping that he is doing his due diligence and homework and remotely watching Celtic and assessing everything as we speak. I'm still disappointed that you haven't had a chance to do your Jerry McLaura B and announce the new manager live on the pod.
Breaking news, everybody! Breaking news.
I'm sure that'll come at some point. But yeah, I think Celtic are in as good a shape as they can possibly be going into Sunday. And hopefully Forest makes it as well, and they'll be in better shape.
Yeah, good comment from Strangelove the Doctor on YouTube. Thanks everybody for commenting. We see them all coming in. I like Kendo, he's doing well, and I appreciate the work that's actually being done on the park. So I think that's another thing that we feel, or certainly I've seen people express, is that towards the end of Neil Lennon's tenure, we weren't really sure what he was doing. We weren't really sure if he was putting anything across to the players in terms of a game plan, and that was something that was certainly alluded to as far as interviews with Callum McGregor would suggest. So to even see the basics being put back in place has been something that's been encouraging. But as for who gets the job, we unfortunately do not know yet. It remains to be seen. You will hear about it here, no doubt, one of the first places you'll hear about it once it does get announced. But until then, we live in hope and expectation. But we'll move on to another contentious topic. Now, Jim, you and I had some off-air discussions about this during the week. It was one of the reasons I chose to distance myself from Twitter this week, because I get into a bit of an exchange with some people on Twitter about a comment I made in reaction to our very own Russell Boyce suggesting that he would take Mourinho for Celtic manager. Now, I'm perhaps a bit extreme in that something that happened in 2003 shouldn't preclude somebody from becoming a Celtic manager, but it does weigh heavily on my mind when I talk about, Mourinho. Now, let's put aside the fact that I don't think we've got a cat and hell's chance of him ever becoming Celtic manager, but if we did, he's got a way of playing football that I find very undesirable. It was on full show in Seville, and it has been since in a lot of teams that he's played. And I don't just mean the negative football and parking the bus and things like that. I mean what I would just call a dishonest method of playing the game. Looking to cheat the referee, looking to cheat certain people. and win in what I would call a less than stellarly manner. My comment to Russell on that and what I was arguing the case was, I don't want to see a Celtic team doing that. I don't want to win trophies that way. We've all seen very close to home what happens when you try and cheat your way to success. It can come back and bite you pretty severely, and that is not something that I would want to happen to my club. So, Jim, I'll come to you first, because I think you had a slightly different opinion to me on it, but what are your thoughts, not only on, Seville and that kind of thing, but on the ethics of playing football more widely?
So I get the easy question then. Good. I think you have to define the word cheating. I don't think Porto cheated. I think it was gamesmanship. And I think you have to look at the laws of the game and look at referees. And if they do their job and it doesn't happen, I mean, one of my bugbears going back decades long before you were born, Laura, it's teams that time waste. Right? You could call that cheating if you want to, call it gamesmanship, whatever you want to call it. And what I don't understand, because I don't understand loads of things about football, what I don't understand why, particularly now with the all-seated stadia, which is a bit of a link to what we're talking about, is they don't stop the clock, right? Because fans get irate when players go down, And it's only in the last maybe 20 years, Tony, you would know better than me, that we've had a fourth official holding up a board to tell us what's happening, how much injury time we're having. Because before that, you'd no idea. You were wondering at the end of the game, when will the game stop? You didn't know. And in this day and age, for me, there's no excuse. If a player gets down injured, the fourth official just stops the clock, and the fans can see the clock, and we can relax, because we know the right amount of injury time is going to get added on. And over the years, I think they've said that in any normal football match, a 90-minute football match, actual physical, the game being played is no more than 65 minutes. So there's 25 minutes lost, at least, in every game, with the ball going out the park, people celebrating goals, and all the stuff that goes with that. So you stop the clock, then you stop the time waste. You get a strong referee who knows the game inside out, then you deal with the gamesmanship that happens. If you do that, it'll still get wiped out. In terms of the question you were asking during the week there about, I thought Porto used a lot of gamesmanship on the night. I like Mourinho. I did like Mourinho for a number of years. I think I liked his teams. I think he's gone a wee bit off the wall in the past few years. But we talked earlier in the season about elite managers. He's one of the elite managers. And you put him in charge of Celtic, I've got no issues at all. So that's my view.
And Tony, this is where football is at its best, is in the grey areas between the black and white, what some of us like, what some of us don't.
Well, let's just
sorry, on you go.
Let's just say, see if you get to a European final, it's not for losers. You do what you can to win the game, right? I'm not saying cheat, but if you're talking about dark arts, you've got to be cuter. Porto were cuter in Celtic that evening, that's all. But it was a win at all cost culture, but they were in a European final. So someone has said to me before, if you were offered the Champions League final but you'd lose it, would you take it? I'd say no chance. Because European finals are not for losers. And I just think that night that, like, it's not in the British psyche to, you call it cheating, but to perform the dark arts, but it should be now, because it's too much to lose in football now. And I just think Celtic that night, they didn't have a strong referee, as Jim said, but I don't want to blame the referee per se, but they just weren't cute enough. They were falling for every Porto trick. Mourinho knew that. That was Celtic's Achilles heel, because you knew it was the old stiff upper lip, British, Scottish way of playing. We're gentlemen, we're this, we're that. He tuned right into it and thought, that's how we'll get them. And they did. It was Celtic's undoing in the end. See, if you go toe-to-toe with that, and you just go, right, is that right? You're going to do it? Well, we can play dirty as well. And Jim will be able to tell you this better, but I think in all of Jock Stein's time, he only set out once to sabotage a match in terms of Celtic's tactics, and that was the away leg in Dukla Prague. In Prague. when they were 3-1 up and they drew 0-0, and seemingly Celtic just kicked the ball out and defended their penalty area and just kept what they had. It was a most unlike Celtic performance, but he said we'll save it for the final, and then they did. They won it by playing the pure, inventive, beautiful football, right? So there's a time and a place for these things, you know, and that was a time and that was a place that night to be cute. You know, that's what annoys you about Seville. They were just cuter. They had better players, but we had a man that was anointed that night. Thought he was going to get a hat trick. You know what I mean? So, you know, people blame Bobo for being sent off. And do you know what? Maybe it had a small bearing, but I actually think Big Sherbet Dab would have saved penalties. He just couldn't save that one that came through. That seemed like a simple ball, you know. But see if it had gone to penalties, I think Big Rab would have saved a couple of penalties. But it's all ifs and buts and maybes. But you just had to be a wee bit cuter and a wee bit wiser to what Porto were up to, you know. And sadly, some British teams, Scottish teams in particular, fall victim to that and have come a cropper big style because of it.
Yeah, Jim.
I think also if we were winning, just to follow that point, Tony, if we'd been winning 3-2 with 10 minutes to go in Seville, we'd have been wasting all the time in the world. That's what we would do. But also, Tony, you made quite an interesting point there, Tony, and this is obviously football's just about different opinions. A few weeks ago, I said something about the quadruple treble being a great achievement, but it was a domestic thing and nobody really paid much attention with it outside Scotland. And I get a few quotes and I get a few comments on YouTube saying, "Don't be daft, this was an unbelievable achievement," etc. And I then posed the question, would you rather be winning Seville or win the quadruple treble? There's only one answer to that, and that's winning in Seville. Would you rather win 9 in a row or win in Seville? It was Seville. And you made a wee point there, Tony, which I would disagree with, actually. I'd have much rather be lost in Seville than did 9 in a row, because Seville was this generation's Lisbon. And people will talk about Seville forever, you know. And they were just, I mean, I was very fortunate to be there. And just to be there and to experience that and to be on the map. And it's unfortunate the way the thing worked out, but everyone was just happy to be there. And if we'd have won, it'd have been icing on the cake. But there's no comparison for me, anyway, my opinion, that if you compared Seville to the quadruple treble, even losing in Seville, I'd take Seville.
What do you say to that, Tony? I think that's a very fair point.
I
think we all have great memories of Seville and of the run and all that.
My thing about Seville is it was just one of the most celebrated failures ever, because losing's no in the equation when you get to the European final. I can't reconcile myself with that. And yep, it was great to get there, and it was everything that my generation have ever wanted to do as a Celtic supporter. It was my Lisbon, but it's just tainted by the fact that we lost. I can't bring myself to watch it. One of my best mates got engaged at Seville. You know, he popped the question in the big square, and the crowd were going mental, and he loves it for that reason as well. And I just like, and it's kind of like, it happened, great. I just wanted to win so badly, just to say that I'd watched my team win a European trophy, and I differ from Jim maybe in that sense. You know, winning was everything to me in Seville. You know, and if it's the one game that I would swap in the history of watching Celtic, it's the one game. Just I want to replay it and win it. Jim might say the World Club Championship against Racing Club or maybe something else. I don't know, but
now that is.
I think back to Seville. I think in terms of Seville, actually, I didn't think we'd win it. I thought Porto would always were too good for us. And the only time I thought we'd win it is when Henry scored the second goal. Yeah. And it was a 10-minute spell there. I thought we could actually win this. And then when that 10-minute spell went away, I thought it's still an uphill task. And I think for me, what was unfortunate is most of the team didn't show up that night. I mean, Henry was unbelievable, but the rest of the team didn't show. Whether it was the heat, I mean, it was like 9 o'clock at night and it was over 100 degrees, so that was understandable. Whether it was just one game too many, but if even half the team had turned up, I mean, it just sneaked it. But it was such an occasion, and to have got there, and it put us on the map. You know, put us on the map more than winning 9 in a row would do, or a quadruple treble would do. Just put us on the map. And yes, it was dead unfortunate we didn't just do it. But I mean, in terms of the last 50 years, that has to be the highlight. In my opinion, sorry. In my opinion.
In my opinion, that's always a caveat. I'll indulge myself and I'll tell you a wee funny story about losing a European final. So I've said before that the Celtic game I would love to have been at, that I hadn't been if I had a choice, was actually the final we lost in 1917 Milan, because my uncle and granddad were at that game and drove down from Glasgow to get to Milan. But the reason I wanted to tell the story was I was at a Celtic Feyenoord friendly. Now, the only memory I have of it was that it was while the temporary stand was still up. So it must have been about 96, 97, something like that. So if somebody in the comments knows and can point me in the direction of it, but I think it was a pre-season friendly anyway. And I got a man was walking along the front, and I was in one of the front rows, and he was a Feyenoord fan, and he gave me his scarf. And I looked up and says to my mum, "This is great. This man gave me his scarf," and she had tears in her eyes. And who knows? My mum's an emotional person at the best of the time, so I thought I'll leave it. But anyway, years later, I says, "Do you remember we were at that Celtic game and you were crying when that man gave me his scarf? Why were you crying?" And she says, "Because one of the stories she remembers my granddad telling was that when he was in Milan, now obviously in those days you got a ticket any which way you could, and so they were sitting in amongst Feyenoord fans, Celtic fans, everything. So he had apparently swapped scarves with a Feyenoord fan at the start of the final, and so that was what made it emotional. But I always remember my uncle completing the story for me. So I was talking to him about it, and he says, "Oh, I had to chase after your granddad at the end of that game." And I says, "Dad, where are you going?" And he says, "Bearing in mind we lost the game." My granddad turned round to my uncle and says, "I'm away to get my bloody scarf back." And I thought to myself, that just about sums him up. But that's a wee story for everybody about losing a European final and what it can do to you. You can be all good spirits at the start, and it can all go at the flick of a switch. But anyway, that's me indulging myself a little bit. But I'll move on to the next topic, which is obviously the game coming up this weekend, the Scottish Cup game, the game against Rangers, which I will not be calling what I called it the other week. I'll be keeping to the Glasgow Derby just to keep the comments sane. Tony, I'll come to you first. As you said before, we're going into a little bit more optimistic than we have for a while, and there's good enough reason for that. What do you expect to see from Celtic, and do you think that we do have a real chance of getting through the tie?
You know what I expect to see? I say it all the time. What do I expect to see? The rip-roaring, free-scoring, never boring Glasgow Celtic going to govern and turning it on. That's what I want to see. That's what we all want to see. Can they do that? I think they're capable. I think if you win 6-0 against anybody, then, we've spoken the last few weeks. We have peppered the opposition goal with hundreds of shots. Don't know what the actual stat is, but there's been a lot. So that doing that manufactured itself last week to Livingston. So I think guys' eyes in, they seem to take their chances well last week. So, they're confident. They're playing, got a wee bit of a swagger back, not saying they're much, but Kennedy's saying the right thing to boost them, saying that they're still the best team in Scotland. A bit of caudology there, a wee bit of mind games, bit of gamesmanship, call it what you like, but it's basically saying to Rangers, you're in a game here. We're not the soft touches of earlier in the season, and that's all the Celtic supporters want to see. And, it'll be a big feather in his cap if he can pull it off. And I think everybody wants to know the story with James Forrest, and hopefully he plays, because since he's come back into the side, offensively they've been terrific. They have missed him. You cannot, for a shadow of a doubt, you cannot say that they haven't. So that he adds a new dynamism to the team. So, and go out there and express yourself and enjoy it. Because, most people are predicting the worst anyway. So why don't you just go and relax, play football the way you can, and, take the game to Rangers and see if you can get a morale-boosting victory for everybody, but more so for yourselves.
Yeah. Jim, do you agree with Tony? Do you expect to see us play with a bit more of a spine this time than we have done in the last few outings against them?
Hope so. I mean, the kind of reason I wanted the season finished is I'm just thinking anything can go wrong this season is going to go wrong. You know, and it would be typical this season if we end up losing 1-0 on Sunday to a dodgy penalty or deflected goal or something like that. But we sat here last Friday and said, well, you know, hopefully the game against Livingston, we put a good performance in, we score a few goals, keep a clean sheet, go there with a bit of confidence, and that's exactly what they've done. So I think if we do turn up, I mean, I think you've got to look at the last time at Ibrox, things were fine up to about 60 minutes, and the sending off changed the game. I would discount the last Glasgow derby because it was a bit of a friendly. If we turn up and we get the breaks for a change, then I think we'll win. I think we'll win something like 3-1. But it would be typical of this season to, as I said, lose 1-0 to a soft goal or something ridiculous. But I'm going for 3-1. Confident.
That's a bold prediction, Jim.
Wow.
I'm bold today, Tony. I'm bold.
Yeah.
Jim, I'll come straight back to you then and move on to what we think about what the lineup might be. Obviously, Stephen Welsh announced this week that he'd signed a new contract. I personally would like to see him in from the start. I don't see any benefit to him being removed from the team, given the high that he'll obviously be on having signed that contract. Would you like to see him in, or would you like to see a change to the lineup?
Oh, I think the team he played last week was going to be the team that plays Sunday. Barry and James Forrest been injured. I think that's what they'll go with. I'm a big fan of Lee Griffiths. I'd like to see Lee Griffiths play the game from the end of the season, but I thought Moy played really well last week, and he's going to change my mind now about if we could get him at a decent fee and not too big wages. He'd be the one guy I'd maybe keep next season. So I would certainly go with the team that played last week. They've got confidence, scored the goals, kept the clean sheet. Has to go with that team. And obviously, if Forrest doesn't make it, then one imagines that Ryan Christie's going to come in as a direct replacement. But same team as last week.
Yeah. Well, Jim's tried to put me in bother there, Tony, I think, because we all know what I said in the post-match coverage about who I'd rather keep out the loanees, but we'll not touch on that again, because poor Colin, if he's watching, will have a heart attack. But I'll come to you. In terms of lineup, what you want to see? You the same as Jim? Would you like to see the same team, or do you want them to mix it up a wee bit?
No, the exact same team. These guys, well, you know, they've got the yellow jersey or the green and white jersey, if you want to make it that way, but you know, they've earned the right to start at Ibrox, you know, depending on what happens before us. But I think back to what Jim said there, I mean, El Yunusi frustrates the absolute life out of me. There is a player in El Yunusi.
Yeah.
You know, it's just not consistent.
Yeah.
You know, and if we're going to lash out £5 million, you need a committed and consistent El Yunusi. You know, because I think El Yunusi, how many goals has he scored? 15, something like that?
17, I think.
You know, El Yunusi's a 25 goal, possibly 30 goal a season guy if he's consistent. Right? But how many times have you relied upon him when he's not turned up? Yet every now and again, he turns up and flashes and spits and starts, and you think there's a player in there.
Yeah.
You know, that it depends on the manager trying to coach it out of him or make him better, or just giving him a free rein to just go and do what he does. You know, because he can score goals and he can affect the play, but $5 million's that's the worry for me. I just think it's too much to spend on a player like El Yunusi, who you can't guarantee will be Mr. Consistent and will be a 30 goal man, as opposed to the guy that turns up now and again and gets you 17. But you know, that's not for me to decide. That's for the manager to decide. But you know, if you can get him for $3 million or something, I'd certainly spend that on him. You know, as Jim said, a cut price fee and, you know, not a massive wage. I would certainly spend $2 or $3 million on him. But $5, I just think you're wanting better quality for $5. You're wanting that consistent player for $5. That's just my own thoughts on it, you know. But I'm hot and cold with El Yunusi, you know.
Yeah, I think to expand a little bit on what I said in the post-match coverage about, I feel like Laxalt, if you're talking about keeping one loan player, I feel like Laxalt, assuming he's going to be under a better quality manager if he does stay next season and if we get our appointment pretty quickly, I think there's a better core of a player there who, when better coached, can be a more consistent sort of contributor to the team. But But Jim, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on, given what Tony said, and I agree with him that consistency is an issue for Moy, in my opinion, that would make me reluctant to spend $5 million on him. What was it that changed your mind with the performance against Livingston? Was it just that performance, or have you seen more from him in recent weeks that was leading you to make that?
No,
that
I think
change?
I think over the last 2 or 3 months, he's come on the park. He's scored goals. He's played. Well, I think one of the big stumbling blocks maybe his wages. I think he's on a lot of money just now, so it's quite easy to say, well, maybe if we get him for $5 million, get him for $3 million. But I think the wages might be a big stumbling block. But of all the loan players, I just thought he certainly got something, And if he could be more consistent and maybe under a different coach or a better coach or playing in a better system with better tactics or with better players round about him, whatever. I just think of the 4 players, and it's also, we've just lost Patrick Klimala. We think Eddie's going to disappear. There's a question mark over Lee Griffiths as well. So where's the goals going to come from next year? He's somebody who's he's now played a couple of seasons here. He's done okay in terms of scoring goals. He's had lots of assists as well. He's played well in Europe as well. So I think if we can get him from that £3 to £5 million bracket and we don't pay him silly wages, I think that'll be the stumbling block. I would certainly have a go at him because I think that it's also obviously we're just at the end of the day we're just fans. We don't know who's out there. We don't know who the club are looking at, if anyone. But I would struggle to think who could we bring in just now. I don't see many people in the Scottish game. In the English game, it's far too expensive. We have to go abroad. Who's there? Don't know. We've got this guy. He's been in the last couple of years. And I thought if we had to pay a lot of money for him, we were talking about 8 or 9 million before, you would think not for that kind of money, but somewhere in the $3 to $5 million bracket and not having too high wages, I would certainly go for him. Not Laxalt, but I'm in the same side of Colin. Forget Laxalt.
Hashtag not Laxalt, but that'll be the...
Hashtag I'm with Colin Watt. Yeah.
Fair enough. Tony...
Tony, it's your shot to go have a go at Laxalt.
Jim raises an interesting point there about where players are going to come from, because given the fact that there isn't anybody outstanding that I think would be in our sort of price range or be interested in coming to us, and the fact that, I think Brexit is going to cause a major issue as well as COVID in terms of how flexible players are about moving, how much finances will be available to make them come. Like, how are we going to sort out the upfront area?
Well, maybe not so much the upfront area, but see if you're looking around the Scottish game, right? I'll name 4 right now. Lewis Ferguson at Aberdeen, Alan Campbell at Motherwell, Joyce Doig at Hibs, and Nisbet at Hibs, right? Now, they're all standout players, right? Affordable for Celtic. If you're going to go down that route and cherry pick the best of what you've been playing against and that know the league.
What about Shankland at Dundee United? Would he make that list?
Scores a lot of goals. Don't know if he's a finished product for me, but he scores a lot of goals. So, again, I said it as well. And if you score goals, then you can't fail to score goals at Celtic unless your name's Ajeti or Klimala or Tony Cascarino or Jim Melrose, right? Something like that. Going back for a Celtic Daz, you know what I mean? But you know what I mean? So if you're doing your homework and you're scouting the best players in your own league, right? There's 4 that I've named that you can go and get tomorrow, right? Or go and get for part of a future rebuild, right? And who would make a big difference to your team.
And could probably afford all of them on the wages that Moy will be on, probably.
Right, but people say, but that'll not help you in Europe. You don't know. You just ask these guys to take a step up in class and see if they can cope, right? But then if that's the case, then every transfer's a gamble, right? But you're talking about affordable players and the fact that Brexit's going to curb your transfer activity. So you and I and Jim are just fans, but you do watch opposition players and you think, he could be a good player on our team, he could make a difference. Well, I certainly do that. And those to me are the standout ones that I'm looking around the Scottish game. And those 4, Lewis Ferguson, Alan Campbell, Joyce Doig and Kevin Nisbet, to me, could make a difference to a Celtic team. Are they better than what we've got? I would say so, yeah. And you could get them all reasonably cheap. Not cheaply, but, cheap enough for a club like Celtic.
Well, I was going to say, certainly you could spend much less than 10 million on them, and you would have nearly a full new team rather than spend 3.5 on 5 million on Ayeti, 3.5 on Klamala, 5 million on Barkas. So from that point of view, it makes business sense. But we'll see if it comes to fruition. They are players that I would be excited to see in a Celtic shirt, and given the way that David Turnbull has settled into things, there's nothing to say that there aren't more that could make that step up from other Scottish clubs, and I think it's a market that we need to look into. We're saying goodbye to Scott Brown after all those years of service and all that success, and he was part of an up-and-coming Hibs side where those players proved themselves full of quality going forward. So, but to round things out, Jim, we've heard your what's the word? Your prediction for the game. You're going 3-1. I'll to round things out, I'll ask you who you think might get on the score sheet for us.
Eddie
Not
hat-trick.
Not Laxalt.
Eddie hat-trick. Big
Eddie
game, Eddie hat-trick.
If he turns up, it could happen. Tony, I'll say the same to you. I'll ask for a score prediction and who you think might get on the score sheet.
I'll say 2-1, and I'll take the man of the moment, El Yunusi, to score at some point.
Yes.
Arguably the winner.
I'm going to be optimistic. I'm going to go 3-1, the same as Jim, and I am going to back my man David Turnbull to get on the score sheet at some point. I would love it. I would love to see it. But we live in hope. We live in hope. We'll be back here next week either celebrating or lamenting. Who knows? Who knows? But thanks everybody for watching today. Thanks for all your comments. I know it was a bit of a heavy start, but hopefully we managed to pick things up by the end of the show. Thanks everybody for watching. Please share on Twitter and on YouTube and all the usual platforms, and we will see you at the weekend for the game coverage as always. Thanks very much.